Hey, so we want to do a change of a pump cup on this pump from a small stove. You can see there's no pump cup here now. This is what we want to put on here. How do we do that without marring the brass shaft of the the pump, or marring up here? How do we do that? Well, first thing is you should get yourself a vise. Do you need a vise this big? No, you don't really need to have one this big. You could have a little teeny one. It doesn't matter. But the important thing that you have with your vise is a pair of vise jaws. Now these are aluminum, and they also have little magnets here, which make them kind of nice. So they'll stick on, and these aren't even actually the right size for this, but it works fine. So you could use this in a smaller vise, and if they hung over, that'd be okay. No big problem. So this is what keeps you from marring up your shaft on your pump rod assembly. Now I have two here today I'm going to work on. This is one from a 22B. It needs a pump cup, obviously. And then this is one from a Radius. 43, I think. This owner had problems. He was probably trying to use pliers or something, and marred up his brass shaft. He also put some little marks here in the knob. And to avoid all that, you can use your vise jaws. I'll show you how it works in a minute. So there's two ways you can do these. One is to remove the knob. This will come off, and then you can get at the mechanism and undo it, put the cup on without ever having to undo this nut here. The other way you can do it is to undo this nut. Now, in most of these, the end of the shaft has been peened, so it makes removing the nut a little problematic. But especially if you have a brass shaft, the steel nut will act like a die and actually thread through that if you use it slowly. So what we're going to do is, first step is I'll show you how I do this, okay? So first step, with the knob, we put this in here, and see there's like some indents. Put this in here, and there you go, got it clamped up. And then you can take a piece of old rubber inner tube, or I like to take a piece of leather to grip the knob. But what do you grip it with? Well, now this is my favorite pair of pliers that I made. These pliers originally had teeth in here, and I filed all the teeth off so that it's smooth. Just a pair of adjustable, pliers, and you file all those off so it's smooth, right? So now you don't have any teeth digging in on anything. Buy yourself a Harbor Freight version and just use that. So take your piece of leather, wrap it around here, and then just grip onto that, and you can wiggle it. If you need to tighten up the vise a little more, you do that and wiggle it. I think that's got it. Felt like it. Oh yeah, see? So that comes off. There you go. Okay? So with that off, we'll be able to do the next step, which is pulling this apart so that we can get the new pump cup on and everything else. Now on this one here, personally I have another technique. What I like to use is to take the nut off. So I'm going to show you how to take the nut off if you want to go that route. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take a little 3-in-1 oil. I'm going to put a little 3-in-1 oil on the tip here. This is going to act like a cutting oil for me here. And then I just take my adjustable crescent wrench, or you could use an actual one that fits, and start rotating that off back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. and it will cut the threads on the peened part of the end of the pump shaft. It'll actually cut the threads properly as you take it off. Yep. So there we are. That was pretty simple. And so there I am. I've got fine threads. There's no problem with these threads. Everything's great. Not an issue. Okay, so that's come off. And now we'll go on and I'll show you how to do the rest of it. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is this one. This is the brass radius one. And to take the pump cup holder assembly off, we're just going to go ahead and clamp the brass part in the vise. Actually, this would probably be better to use the end here. There we go. Yeah. See, so I've got this little grippy round thing here set in. And then it's just a matter of taking your adjustable crescent or actual sized crescent, whichever you prefer. Open end wrench, whatever you want to call it. And then you can spin this nut loose like this. Alright, so that's off. Now all we have is the residue of the old pump cup, and we just peel that off. If it's really nasty, you know, you can get in there and clean more to your satisfaction, but this is pretty easy. So now we take the pump cup, slide it back on here, the new pump cup, slide it on here. You may have to work it on with your fingers so that you can get it past the threads, so you can get a start with your pump cup retaining nut. Let's call that. And so there's our steel nut, ready to go back on the brass part. And again, let's just get that on there, started. Okay, so then you can just go ahead and clamp up the whole mess. Now, if you don't have a vise, get a vise. You don't need a fancy vise like this. You can get an inexpensive vise or a smaller vise. They're not expensive. Come on. If you're going to do work on stuff like stoves, you owe it to the stove and your stuff to have the right tool. So now I'm just going to go ahead and tighten this up right here like that. And it doesn't have to be super tight. And there you are. So pump cup replaced. Put it back together. Here we go again. Put it like this. Put it in those accessory vise jaws that we have here. Spin our knob back on. And at this point, if you wanted to, you could use a little blue thread locker on here just to keep it more secure. I hear my neighbors have their yard guy in. That's great. Right in the middle of my video. Anyway, then just tighten that baby up. There you go. Job completed. Ready to go back ready to soak this in oil and then back in the stove, and you're all done without having ever to monkey with this nut. Now if you want to do it the other way, where you do take the nut off, remember we had this piece here, same deal. I'm going to put that in the vise, although you could use a screwdriver across here just to keep from monkeying that up, from goofing up that slot. It's just a lot easier to use a pair of these vise jaws in your big vise or your little vise. Use a pair of the vise jaws, your adjustable crescent, or your actual open end wrench for the proper size, go ahead and unscrew that. And there you go, that nut's off. Peel that off and put your new pump cup on here, which I gotta go get one of. Okay, so here we are back here. And so now I just go ahead there. Again, work it down. Work it down so that the leather is past the threads, so the nut will have somewhere to grip. You have to have some threads so the nut can thread itself on there. And we just work those down like that. Get that started. Yeah. And then again, you can just use your vice jaws, your accessory vice jaws, without hurting anything, because see, they're aluminum, so they're soft. And get the rest of that on there. Again, adjustable crescent wrench or an open end wrench of the proper size will take care of that. Alright, so that's done. How do I solve this other problem? Okay, well, what I do at this point, I wipe this down good. You can use a little solvent. Wipe this down good so that there's no more oil in those threads. Alright, and wipe down the nut, again with some solvent if you have it, get the oil out of the threads. And now clamp up your pump shaft and dang, here it is. Go ahead and put your pump cup on there. And you're going to put just a tiny little bit of thread locker on here, and then you don't have to worry about peening anymore because the thread locker works great. A little bit of thread locker. Use blue, not red. Red is very permanent. Oops, battery went away. All right, so back to where I was. We just take this and go ahead and thread it on here. Now, if you're going to use this method, you have to not thread too much. This should wobble. If it doesn't wobble, it won't allow air past the pump. So it has to wobble. Don't make it too tight. It has to have some wobble to it. Okay, and I'm going to add just a little bit of thread locker because my battery went out. Some of it disappeared and went away. Just put a little bit in there. Wiggle that. There we go. So make sure it's never tight on these. You always want that to work like that. So when you pull out on the pump rod, it allows air past that tapered surface that's in here. And when you push on it, it closes it off. So that one's done. So there's two methods to do it. Again, the key is to get yourself a pair of these vice jaws, these accessory vice jaws. These are aluminum. They make them in plastic too. You know, the idea being that aluminum and plastic are softer than the steel and brass that you're working on, so you're not going to injure anything. And these were probably under $10, I want to say. Certainly under $20. I didn't pay more than $20 for these. You don't need a vise this big. You can get a little tiny vise and still use these vice jaws. Other things you can do if you don't want to do all that, it is possible to take some sheet copper. These are some other jaws that I've used for years now. You take some sheet copper and put them in here, and that kind of works pretty well. But because of the multi contact points of these V grooves that are in here, these are just great. I really think they're super. So, you know, look around. You can find them. Just look for vice jaws or soft vice jaws. And that should take care of it. All right.